Dweep are, each of them represents one of these different angas. So today we speak a little bit about Vandanam, and as I said, we begin by offering our regard to Prahlad Maharaj, one of the Mahajans. And we find that as with the other of these principal angas, there are examples of great devotees who are said to have become perfect through a particular anga. Sukadev, perfect through kirtan, his particular type of kirtan, I mean the Bhagavad narrative. Parikshit Maharaj, who heard from Sukadev Goswami, an example of perfection through Shravanam, so Shravanam, Kirtanam. And similarly with Vandanam, Rupa Goswami has given examples of all of these of devotees who have become perfect by each of these angas. So with regard to Vandanam, the example is Akrura. Akrura was like an uncle of Krishna from Mathura, and he was sent to Mathura, from Mathura to Vrindavan by Kamsa to bring Krishna and Balaram after they had been invited by Kamsa to participate in a wrestling match. Akrura, of course, was a devotee, but Kamsa was the ruler, and he was eager to meet Krishna and Balaram and bring them there, of course, with the hopes that they'd be successful, which seemed unlikely, successful or victorious in the wrestling match. It seemed unlikely because the opponents, Chanur and Mustika, were like world wrestling champions, if you will. And these were just boys, young boys, barely had turned adolescents. Their experience with wrestling was amongst one another, which was mostly a lot of bragging on one another's parts and so forth, and all of that in play. That said, of course, Krishna was successful in defeating various of Kamsa's assassins. So in terms of the Aishvarya, it was assured that he would be successful. From the Madhuri perspective, there was some doubt, to be sure. At any rate, Akrura was overwhelmed with the opportunity to meet Krishna and Balaram. He went, and he had the, in one sense, unfortunate task of bringing Krishna and Balaram to Mathura, to this wrestling match where the wrestlers, at least from the naked eye, were unmatched. But besides that, for whatever reason, he was bringing them to Mathura. He was bringing them out of Vrindavan, and this was a cause of great distress for the inhabitants and the gopis in particular. Gopis here refers to of course, the young Kishoris, the lovers of Krishna, and the elderly gopis as well, each of whom had to remain behind. Whereas some elder cowherd men and cowherd boyfriends of Krishna, they could accompany him. But it's a very, very powerful and touching scene as Krishna and Balaram mount the chariot of Akrura and head for Vrindavan, with gopis prostrating themselves before the chariot and so on and so forth, weeping, and Krishna's heart beating very strongly for them as well. And Akrura, again, had the uncomfortable kind of task, if you will, of being the driver. He had to swerve around the gopis, if you will, who were like prostrating themselves, as I said, before the chariot, and started to follow after him as well. So he went in a roundabout way. Cowherd boys followed behind, at first walking, and then they hopped onto the wagons that had been arranged by the elderly cowherd men to accompany Krishna and Balaram for the event. And the chariot left, of course, before everything was prepared, and picked up the boys along the way. But the point is here that the chariot was off to itself, so to speak, with just Krishna and Balaram and Akrura heading at lightning speed towards Mathura, but in a roundabout way. If the gopis were to continue to follow and take the straight route, they wouldn't find them. So for that reason, he went in an indirect route, and for that reason, they arrived at midday at what was previously referred to as Ananda Tirtha and later became known as Akrura Ghat, because of the famous incident during the bathing of Akrura, that the epiphany that he experienced that resulted in his prayers. So when the story goes, of course, as they arrived at Akrura Ghat, it happened to be midday because it took a long time to get there, given the roundabout way in which Akrura led the chariot. And noontime, of course, is a time for prayer, as is dawn and as is dusk. These are the Trisandhyams, the three connections between morning and day, between day and morning and afternoon, and between the end of the afternoon and the nighttime. Times to which typically in the culture would be for sitting and remembering what my day is for, what my purpose is, and so forth, and invoking the Gayatri mantra typically. So it was a time for Akrura to conduct his worship of his deity. Meanwhile, he's driving the chariot of his deity, but he didn't have a clear and perfect understanding of the connection of Krishna and Balaram and his deity, God, Narayan. Although he was in love with Krishna and attracted to him and so on and so forth, this kind of a philosophical connection was not been fully it was not fully in place. So he can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I thought I might have lost you. Excuse me.
No.
So he stopped the chariot there, and Krishna and Balaram dismounted, and they went and performed Achman in the Jamuna, and Akrura then asked their permission to bathe, and take a moment to invoke his mantra and observe his religious ritual, which was not something that Krishna and Balaram were accustomed to doing, because as of this point in Leela, they had not received the sacred thread. They had not lived at the feet of their guru in the Gurukul and so forth. This was something that was to come later on. So typically then, for example, in this regard, the deities of Krishna and Balaram that we worship would typically not be ornamented, if you will, with the Brahman thread, which is a Mathura Leela, and we worship them in terms of the Braj Leela, freezing the Leela, as I sometimes say, at this point where in the Prakat Leela, Krishna goes to Mathura. He doesn't go there, he stopped there, and just the days that precede that, days like that continue in eternity, right? So Krishna didn't, and Balaram didn't perform Gayatri. It wasn't something that they were had been had learned how to do. They weren't initiated, but they honored the religious sensibilities, of course, of Akrura, and with their permission, whom he was carrying, he proceeded to the Jamuna at this auspicious place and began to bathe. He had secured Krishna and Balaram on the chariot, and was concerned about their protection, because they kind of strapped them in, if you will, fastened their seatbelts on the chariot. And then, while having bathed, while chanting his mantra, to his astonishment, he saw Krishna and Balaram bathing. And so he thought, I just put them on the chariot. And so how can they be here bathing? Something happened. So he went back to the chariot, and there they were seated on the chariot. So he's that much more confused, as you can imagine, and proceeded back to the ghat, to the bathing ghat, to try to understand the situation. And there, again, he saw Krishna and Balaram, but he saw them in the form of Vishnu and Anantasesh. Vishnu seated on the couch of Anantasesh. And this majestic manifestation of his deity, Vishnu, accompanied by Ananta, and the fact that they, as it appeared, were non-different from Krishna and Balaram, was overwhelming to him, overwhelming, as you can imagine. So having had this experience, he was bathing, I should say, also not only with the desire to perform the religious ritual appropriate for the time and so forth, but also with a feeling that he had offended the gopis. And what could he do? I mean, this was his task. He was commissioned to bring Krishna and Balaram by the king to Mathura, but he felt that he had offended the gopis in the process, and for this reason as well, that being in his heart, he wanted to bathe in the Jamuna at an auspicious time and try to purify himself from any offense that he may have committed. He was pretty overwhelmed, by his experience of the Brajbasis and their feelings of separation, especially as those exhibited by the young gopis. And so this was his majestic experience. The place became noted from thereafter as Akrura Ghat. It's the same place that that Krishna revealed to the Brajbasis what they would be in their next life when they asked. So it's, anyway, an auspicious place. But from that, and having had that epiphany, then Akrura offers a chapter, if you will, of prayers, 40th chapter of the 10th canto. And of course, after the prayers, Krishna says, well, what are you talking about? You're my uncle. And you're calling me all these things, absorbed in Madhurya and the sweetness of his human-like Leela. His resistance, if you will, or his response is something like the mental response that Brahma perceived from Krishna when he was offering his prayers. So anyway, this is the famous incident in which Akrura is said to have attained full perfection. I suppose we could say his perfection was to make, to solidify in his own realization the connection between his deity and Krishna. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. The fact that that Akura was feeling unqualified and an offender, having seen the reaction of the Braj Gopis, and trying to digest that and so forth. Akura also stands out in this regard as an example of someone who feels perhaps unfit to render personal service to the deity. Archanam is another anga of bhakti, and it involves personal service to the Lord in the form of his Archa avatar, the Archa Vigraha, the deity manifestation. And there are certain qualifications for that. Of course, one has to receive the mantra and so forth. There are procedures, cleanliness is a concern. To be on time is a concern. To recitation of various mantras and so forth. And of course, paying respects, obeisances. These are all parts of Archanam. So, in effect, the in effect, I would say that, and Jiva Goswami has made this point, the essence of Archana comes down to namaskar, offering pranam to the deity. And if we extract that out, that offering of pranam to the deity, unto itself, this is essentially what Vandanam consists of. Therefore, Jiva Goswami has made the point, some people feel themselves unqualified to do personal service, and therefore they resort to Vandanam. And just in an essential sense of what Vandanam constitutes, they offer their pranam, their dandavat pranam to the deity. Perhaps at some distance, we see this in for example, in Haridas Thakur in Gaur Leela. He felt unfit to sometimes even to come before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to speak of going in the temple of Jagannath, engaging in Archanam. So he would pay respects even from a distance. But it's thought, given the power of, hold on a second. Given the power of Vandanam, that this in itself is complete, and all the results that one can derive from Archanam, one can derive from this alone. So we see, anyway, to some extent, that this same idea is found in the Leela that I'm describing, in that Akura felt impure, unqualified. He bathed in the river, and he resorted to Vandanam. And this idea that as to the efficacy of Vandanam in the form of offering pranam, bowing down, the idea of the efficacy of this as an act of devotion unto itself is underscored in the Bhagavatam, as some of you may be aware, in Brahma's prayers, in the 8th prayer of his 30-some prayers. At the commencement of the Brahma Vimohan Leela, Brahma offers his prayers, and there he makes this very point in a famous verse, a verse that was that Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj liked to render poetically. The environment is friendly. The verse goes something like this: Tate nukampam susamikshamanu Bunjana evatmakritam vibhakam. Hridvagvapu viridan namaste jiveta yumuktipade sadaya bhak. So how this is an example of what we're talking about, we'll try to explain briefly. Here the verse says jiveta. Jiveta means one's life. So it's speaking of a type of livelihood. And that livelihood, or that occupation, if you will, or preoccupation, is one of bhakti that is characterized, so a life of bhakti, staying the course, if you will, a life of bhakti, staying the course, and in the context of that, tolerating or even accepting as favorable for in terms of the pursuit of one's goal, to attain Krishna Prem, for example, everything that happens to me, whether it be good from a material point of view or bad. Of course, we're getting good and bad results from our prarabdha karma that's gradually being extinguished. We say that bhakti extinguishes even the prarabdha karma, which is one of the extraordinary characteristics of bhakti, and distinguishes it as such from gyan. By gyan, we can uproot avidya, ignorance, which is the source of our whole material entanglement. But once that entanglement has been set in motion, then that which is playing itself out in the present manifest karma, needs to play itself out and unwind, if you will. Even after ignorance, the root of all that is uprooted. But bhakti, by contrast, can do away with even the manifest karma, which jnana unto itself cannot. The jivan mukti is a term that refers to it. It's a term that's largely invoked by jnanis in pursuit of sayuja mukti, merging with Brahman. The jivan mukta is thought to be a person who has uprooted ignorance and is witnessing the gradual playing out of his or her prarabdha karma without reacting to it. This is not something that's accepted in the devotional school as being what the jnanis portray it to be. For example, the term jivan mukti is twice invoked in Chaitanya Charitamrita in relation to a famous verse from the second chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, where it is said that, what is that verse? Ariya kuchjena paramapadam tadapatanti adho nandita yushmadangraya vimukta manina abhishuddha buddhaya. There are people. Yeah, there are these persons who think that they're liberated, but their intelligence is not pure. Avishuddha buddhaya. Abhishuddha. They don't have pure intelligence, impure intelligence. They're confused, actually, and they think they're liberated, but they're not. They have no regard for bhakti, which is the only way by which one can attain any type of liberation, as Krishna says in the Gita. What does he say there? Only by mama maya duratya mameva prapadyante maya metam tarantite. This maya is insurmountable, like an ocean. You stand on the shore of the ocean and you think of swimming to the other side, even crossing with a boat. Seems like an insurmountable journey, or going into outer space. How far can you go? So to cross over the influence of Maya is basically Krishna says it's not possible, but except for by my grace. So this is just one of many, many verses that underscore the point that yes, even you might have a passport and realize that you're not the body, but this is really can be the influence of sattva guna. It does not give you a visa to enter in to the Paravyom in any form, even into Brahma Sayuja. So without bhakti, it's not possible. And if we disregard bhakti, then Bhagavatam says, from this position, one falls from even a perceived position of liberation in the body, waiting for the prabdha karma to expire, which is not really a position of liberation. From there, one falls. As I say, the Gaudiya Vaishnavas don't look at this idea of Jivan Mukti in the way that is often done in the Gyan Marg. And there may be Jivan Muktas of sorts, if you will, this type of person who don't offend bhakti. And if they don't offend bhakti and they employ bhakti in their practice, then they contain their desired goal, Brahma Sayuja, merging in Brahman, which arguably is an incomplete form of liberation because there's no Shakti, no Swarup Shakti manifest there. Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes it as some type of a kind of an imperfect form of liberation. But at any rate, excuse me, how we got there, I'm not sure. Forgive me. But if one, in one's life, to return to the verse, leads a life of bhakti, staying the course, tolerating the results, I guess how we got there, of one's past, as even welcoming it, if you will. We can look at it in a couple ways. Welcoming this prabdha karma that bhakti is now digesting. In bhakti, as I said, bhakti can remove the prabdha karma, gyan cannot, but still it removes the prabdha karma gradually. And Jiva Goswami is giving an example. If you light a string or a cloth on this end, and you're holding it on this end, well, it's going to burn your fingers. At a certain point, you're going to have to let it go. So you can light the cloth and walk away and say, I burned, the cloth has been burned up, even though it will take some time, to burn the entire cloth. Once it's on fire, if it's highly flammable, then you can say it's been burnt up. So once the engine of bhakti bestowed is turned on, if you will, then we can say the prabdha karma has been destroyed, even though it will take some time to gradually destroy, because now you have a means to actually do that, whereas dhyan, by comparison, does not have that capacity. So this is one way to look at what's described in the verse, that tatenu kampam susamikshamana. Having susamikshamana also means like having seen the anukampam, the compassion of Krishna towards his devotees, seen many examples of that in the past through the Leela narratives and so on and so forth. One thinks that he's like that. He's very compassionate to the devotees. So he will be compassionate towards me, or desiring, it can be said here from the verse, that compassion of the Lord. The devotee who's leading a life of, in this case, sadhana bhakti, tolerates or even welcomes, as I say, the results of prabdha karma as they manifest, because they're manifesting in such a ways that they're being terminated by bhakti, and in due course, one will be a jivan mukta in the bhakti sense of the term. There's a nice verse from maybe Krishna Yamala in the Tantra that Rupa Goswami invokes in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. How does that verse go? He says, anyway, Jivan Mukta Sa Uchita, he says, Hari Bhagati, one who's
something with Isa, Yasya, Harer, I don't remember the details.
Yes, Harer, anyway, one who's intelligent, mind, intelligence, body, words, and so forth, are fully engaged in Krishna service, he or she is said to be a Jivan Mukta. So it's a different definition of Jivan Mukta. So there is an idea of Jivan Mukti within Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This is Bhava Bhakti. So for a sadhaka whose goal is Bhava Bhakti, which the cultivation of will result in Prem Bhakti, that devotee in sadhana bhakti expresses this type of tolerance, if you will, or even welcoming, to use again Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj's poetic rendering of the verse, the environment is friendly. So whatever's happening to me as a result of my prabdha karma, it's good for me. To take this another step, characteristic of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who emphasizes the efficacy of bhakti, underscores it over and over again. He says, karma is finished. There's no karma. This is the arrangements of Krishna in the sadhaka's life. Whatever happens to him or her, this is Krishna's arrangement for their benefit to progress in bhakti. So they lead a life, jiveta yu mukti pade sadaya bhak, with this type of disposition. Whatever's happening to me, that's arranged by Krishna for my benefit, so I embrace it. I don't have to run away from it. It's good for me. Krishna has arranged it. We can also look at it as kind of a combination of the two. Is it the prabdha karma or is it Krishna's mercy? It's the prabdha karma, but not the full measure of what would have been the result, but an adjusted result as a result of one's dedicating one's life to Krishna. So we can harmonize the two perspectives. It's the karma, it's bhakti, it's both. And so the verse says, relative to the discussion about Vandanam, but tenu kampam susamikshama bhujane vatmakritam vipakam. So the vipakam we're describing these results, good and bad, that we accrue. We can even have to tolerate the good effects. We get an inheritance. We don't get carried away by that. I know some devotees who got carried away by their inheritance. They didn't have any desire until they got an inheritance. So he says here anyway, Kridbag Vapu Namaste, that tolerating or welcoming such with that outlook that I've described in a life of bhakti, the devotee from his heart, Hrid Vag Vapu Bir, Viridan Namaste. So Namaste is, of course, the central idea here that we're underscoring, and how Jiva Goswami has looked at this verse with regard to Vandanam. The essence of Vandanam, again, being Namaskar. And that is to be done, if it's to be done truly, is with the heart, if you will, not just an exercise of a calisthenic, right, of lying down and getting up, but with one's heart and with one's words, and so with heart, words, and body. So to prostrate oneself and offer respect to the deity from one's heart. This is the essence of the Namaskar, and that is the essence of Vandanam. And that is very easy to do, but it's very simple, but I should say very simple, but difficult to do, right? And this is characteristic of bhakti overall. It's very simple, but it's difficult to do, given our how we've complicated our lives with misconceptions, desires, attachments, and so on and so forth. But there's the point here, there's the great power in that. And the power of this is revealed in the last line of the verse. But just think for a minute how simple this is. Living a life, tolerating the goods and bads that come our way, not being carried away by them in either instance, and being focused just on this prayerful, disposition and adherence to bhakti sadhana. Paying obeisances. There used to be, this used to be something that was, we hear, for example, the life of the Goswami, Sankhya Purvaka Namagana, they chanted a prescribed number of rounds, prescribed number of dandavats to Vaishnavas, or a round to Govardhan Hill, as may be the case, or from deity to, get up in the morning, go to artik at one temple. The principal temples in Vrindavan were schedule their artiks such that you could go to one and then as it ends, go to the next, from Radha Govinda to Radha Shyam Sundar to Radha Raman, and so on and so forth, and spend your whole morning like this, just going and paying obeisances to one deity after another. It's a beautiful thing. It's very easy to do. It's not complicated. It doesn't require a lot of scholarship. It's certainly not like living in the Himalayas, sleeping on a bed of nails, bathing in the Ganga, at Gomukh, at the glacier, up to one's neck in the coldest months of the year. It's to tolerate and realize that there's no difference between hot and cold. These are only mental conceptions. Those are very such austerities, if you will, are very difficult comparatively. This is very beautiful, easy to do, simple to do, but hard to do because it requires exercising the heart. In Gyan, the exercise of the heart is not called upon to the same extent, right? And the heart is hardened. In the bhakti, it's softened, but we have a hard heart, so we have to soften it. It's not easy. It's one thing to perform austerities with an idea to become great, powerful, develop cities, become a mukta, become God, as it's thought in such some schools. It's another thing to be a servant altogether. As I've said before, the latter is a very comprehensive and overwhelming way to do away with the enjoying ego, which is our whole problem. Simply to stop from taking in the pursuit of mukti as a desire, powers, special powers, so on and so forth. This doesn't call upon one to the same extent, doesn't have the same power to retire, if you will, the enjoying ego, which is the whole problem in material existence. Therefore, when asked about this, Parikshit Maharaj, by Sukadev, Parikshit Maharaj said, yeah, Gyan is not very effective. You can cut off the bamboo shoots at the ground level, but the roots are still there. So the likelihood that they will grow back is considerable. So he's saying Gyan without bhakti will not be a solution to the problem of material existence. Kechid kebalaya bhakti vasudeva. So, but this, he gives the example. You might start a fire, just like if we drive from here, from Madhara to San Francisco in the afternoon. Well, the Bay Bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge, there'll be a fog there coming over the city. So you might want to light a fire to do away with the fog because the heat will dissipate the condensation, but you could burn down the city in the process, right? And what kind of a fire you'd have to build. But if the sun comes up, it's bright that day on its own, the fog will be dissipated. So bhakti is like this. The sun, it rises of its own accord. If we wait for it to rise, living a life of bhakti, tolerating whatever comes our way, and seeing, for that matter, even that this is whatever happens is good for us, looking for the silver lining in it all, and just paying one's obeisances. Again, this is the essence of Vandanam to Bhagavan. Then jiveta yo mukti, jiveta, a life like this, mukti pade sadaya bhak. One attains liberation at the feet of Krishna. Here, the 9th and the 10th subjects of the Bhagavatam are contained in the two words mukti pade. The 9th subject, which is one of the sheltered subjects of the Bhagavatam, of which there are 8 others, is mukti. In the words, is one of the main topics of the Bhagavatam, mukti. Mukti ritvanyata arupam swarupena vavastiti. And by contrast to the 9 sheltered topics, there's one shelter giving topic, and that is Krishna himself. So he is represented here by the word pade, feet. There's feet within mukti, or at the feet of someone, mukti is found, as we said, at the feet of Krishna, where you will find bhakti. There you will find mukti. Bhakti can give mukti, but mukti cannot give bhakti. Jiveta yo mukti pade sadaya bhak. There, the word dayabhak means that it becomes one becomes the heir to prem, really. Prem is pade, at the feet of Krishna. And so the point has been made that what do you need to do to again, stress or emphasize the simplicity of bhakti here in the form of Vandanam? What do you need to do to attain something beyond mukti? Because you could attain mukti by Krishna's grace in the form of Sayuja mukti, but to attain the full face of mukti at the feet of Bhagavan, in service to Bhagavan, which is what we're all about. That's what the jivas are for serving Bhagavan. Anyway, to attain that is huge, and here the verse is saying that in order to do that, one simply has to live one's life in this way. Just like in order to get your inheritance, you have to live your life. So that's all you have to do. You have to stay alive to get your inheritance. Someone will die who's left you an inheritance. And if you stay alive, all you have to do is stay alive and you'll get it. So this is what the verse is saying. Just stay alive. But what alive means here is a life of bhakti. Because we could live, breathe, move about, heart could beat, brain could function, and so forth. But from our perspective, if we're not breathing for and thinking about, and our heart is not beating for bhakti, then we'd be better off dead, practically, especially if the opportunity for bhakti came our way and we didn't take advantage of it. So living means a life in the full sense of bhakti. And so, again, the simplicity is empty. If we stay alive in bhakti and simply in a heartfelt way offer our pranam, namaskar to Krishna, then that inheritance, which is being held for us, it will be released. So in this way, the simplicity of Vandanam has been underscored, and the fact that it is, in effect, the essence of Archanam, and in an easy form of Archanam, even for those who feel themselves, I should say, unqualified for Archanam. The qualifications for Archanam may be overshadowed by the ideas within the karma marg of what's required in order to serve the deity, to be born as a Brahmin and so on. These things don't apply in the bhakti understanding of Archanam. So anyone can be qualified. Certainly Haridas Thakur was qualified to serve the deity. I mentioned him earlier. In fact, indeed, the deity came to him every day. Jagannath came to him every day in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was certainly qualified to enter the temple, but he didn't feel himself qualified. So Akrura didn't feel himself qualified. He felt himself, he was an instrument in the hands of Krishna's Leela Shakti, right? To, in a stage of unfolding the Leela, looked at from the broader perspective. He's taking Krishna out of Vrindavan. How horrible, but from our point of view, then what's happening is the love of the inhabitants of Vrindavan is being showcased in the form of their separation. How they longed for Krishna to return, and life was never the same for them without him. We talked about Balaram's return and so forth in the pitiable condition there in Braj, which he felt and then experienced personally, being in Braj without Krishna. Goodness. Of course, in that feeling of his absence in Braj, he's actually more present than he is present in any other Leela, like the Mathura or the Dwarka Leela. This is a central point. Of course, the Gaudiya Vaishnavism, nature of love and separation. But again, as an instrument through which this Prakat Leela can unfold, and the separation of the inhabitants of Vrindavan can be showcased for us, that through good association in connection with the Prakat Leela narrative, which is what our life's all about, understanding the Prakat Leela. Krishna came here, he did this. What more significant event could there be other than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming? You didn't get it? Let me underscore what that was all about. So this is what our whole life is about, understanding Krishna Leela, and through the medium of Gaur Leela and the Sadhu Sangha that has flooded the world with, if you will, or made available in the world. I don't know if it's a flood yet, but it's gradually, hopefully, increasing in its force and measure. But if we preoccupy ourselves in this way with the Prakat Leela, then we'll understand, Akrura, he took Krishna out of Vrindavan, and by that, the measure of their love, which is shown to increase in separation or to be showcased that much further. If you have something that you love very much, and then you lose it, the extent to which you love it will be apparent, right? It's said that in union, there is one Krishna, and in separation, there everywhere is Krishna. Krishna's in one place, standing in front before me. In separation, Krishna's everywhere. Everywhere I look, he is in his absence. Everything, in other words, reminds me of him only. So the power of love and separation, which is in an overriding sense, what characterizes the Prakat Leela, where the Prakat Leela is characterized by union. So the virtues of the Prakat Leela, Prakat also means the manifest or the visible Leela, but it also means Prakat means the best. So from a sadhaka's point of view, obviously this is the best as a means, and from the siddha's point of view, it's the best also. Therefore, when Jiva Goswami wrote his Gopal Champu, which is a retelling of the Prakat Leela, it's in Aprakat Leela, and all the inhabitants are hearing the Prakat Leela retold with rapt attention. There's no greater evening event than this event described in Gopal Champu. The retelling on the part of the bard, the minstrels, the bards of the Prakat Leela. So Akrura Mahashai Ki Jai. The gopis are angry with him on the face of things, but that's understandable. So he's an example, then again, as they say, of someone who became perfect by prayer. And prayer or Vandanam is, to go just in a little bit of detail as we come to a conclusion of the discussion here today, is said to be relative, prayer, the nature of it, to the stage of one's bhakti. And this means sadhana bhakti is one stage, or bhava bhakti as another. So two basic types of prayer. And in sadhana bhakti, the prayers that are, the nature of the prayers is that they are like a prayer that's suitable for, in pursuit of submission and surrender. This is what's central to sadhana bhakti, the culture of sharanagati, that shraddha or faith corresponds with the growing of one's faith, and the erection, as I often say, of the erecting the stage, the dramatic stage of sharanagati on which the drama of Krishna Lila is performed. So we find many prayers like this on the part of great souls, illustrating this the nature of prayers for sadhakas. Jiva Goswami gives an example. I always liked this verse, learned it as a young brahmachari. I can't remember, but I've written it down here somewhere. Yuvatinam yata yunam, yunam cha yuvato yata. Manobhiramate tadvan manobhiramatam tvayi. This is a prayer that is, Jiva Goswami gives us as an example of a prayer in sadhana bhakti. Just as the minds of young women are attracted to a young man, and just as the minds of young men are attracted to young women, may my mind, Krishna, be attracted to you. You have to think. Now, this is what we're talking about here. This is what we're pursuing, right? It's very easy to understand how, without thinking about it, a young man will be attracted to a young woman and vice versa, without thinking about it. It's natural, it's spontaneous, and it may even carry on, right? Without trying. She was attractive. He was attractive. Can't forget about him. This is our material condition. What we're interested in is similar in terms of intensity and naturalness, attraction to Krishna. So from this we can measure our very easily, very readily, our standing in bhakti, how we are naturally attracted to things other than bhakti in the same way, just like we're attracted to our own body or attentive to its own needs without thinking about it. So attentive to the service of Krishna without thinking about it, if it should, opportunities to serve in a particular way should arise. A very nice verse. And then the other division of prayer, of course, is in Bhava Bhakti, as I say. And this is characterized by longing. And there are prayers that appear to be prayers longing for Bhava Bhakti, but are actually prayers within Bhava Bhakti that are longing for a specific attainment within Bhava Bhakti. So, in other words, within Bhava Bhakti, one's identity as in the Nitya Lila is apparent. And with regard to within the specifics of it, one is praying for it. So the prayers may seem to be a prayer for Bhava Bhakti, but they're prayers within Bhava Bhakti for a specific thing. I've written a nice verse here. Let's see. Of course, there are many examples of this, but I don't know where. Jiva Goswami gave an example of a devotee praying to Bhagawan that along with this, accompanied by Shri, please be merciful to me. When will you call me while I'm fanning you and say, please come here, come close to me. So something specific with regard to his ideal of attainment and service in the Leela. Typically, Lala Somayi prayers of this nature are what we find in Bhava Bhakti. So submission and long, and of course there's some overlapping, especially in the higher stages of sadhana bhakti, and some little bit of longing should be there within all of us in any stage of bhakti for the ideal. We should know what it is theoretically. And then finally, with regard to prayer, there are of course prayers heartfelt that we can compose ourselves, but there's great power in prayers that have been composed. There are prayers like Akrura's prayers in the scripture, Brahma's prayers, so on, the Nagapatni's prayers, and so on and so forth. In Bhagavatam, these are called stotras, and invoking them, for example, before the deity is a very powerful form of Vandanam that's very efficacious. And then we have another type of prayers called stavas. So stavas are prayers composed by, for example, devotees in our sampradaya, and they have particular ideals in mind, and they can also be invoked and very powerful before the deity. Sometimes even stotrams become stavas if they're recited, like verses from the Gita, for example. I think this example may be given by Jiva Goswami. Verses from the Gita that are stotram turned into stavas because they're used in a particular way by a devotee with a specific purpose in the context of bhakti in mind. So these are some thoughts, and we've gone the whole hour on Vandanam, and we're honored to be able to speak something about it and draw from what our previous acharyas have written. That said, I speak about this here upon request in the context of a I think it's a Japa retreat coinciding with the days leading to Janmashtami, beginning with Baladev Purnima a few days back. And with regard to Nam Sankirtan, I would say, and connection to Mandalam, that it should be, the names of Krishna should be chanted prayerfully from the heart. Prabhupada used to once say that Hare Krishna mantra was the best prayer. So it's not a prayer in one sense, because you're not asking for anything. You're just invoking the name Hare Krishna, but we're invoking it ideally. I mean, it is in the vocative case, it's like to calling out Krishna. It's not just saying it, but there's a feeling to it. So we're calling out. Prabhupada used to give the example of a child calling out for his mother, his source. It's kind of like a real basic sense, but important and helpful to think about. We invoke the name. It's kind of exclamatory. Hare, it's a name for Hare. Hare, oh Hare, oh Krishna, oh Ram. I've said before, and I think I'll conclude with this, it's worth underscoring that if you want to chant attentively, difficult to do because the mind wanders, then the simple solution to that is to chant from the heart. Of course, simple is not always easy, but that is our exercise. This is a heart exercise, not a mouth exercise, a tongue exercise, or an ear exercise. Chanting is a heart exercise. So if prayerfully, if you will, from the heart, we invoke the name of Krishna, then wherever Wherever your heart is, wherever you give your heart, that's where your mind is going to be. There's just no way around that. So if you take the time, you have time allotted for your japa, for example, or kirtan. These are precious times to give your heart to entirely. Shut out everything else. Give your heart to that. Mind will follow naturally. And when mind is attentive, then all the wealth found in Krishna Nam, Guna, Rupa, Leela, Parshad, all these things are found in the form of Krishna, the name, the qualities of Krishna, the Leelas and associates of Krishna will all become revealed in your heart. You don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't cost anything. This is very, very simple, economical way to become wealthy in the true sense of the term. Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Shri Vandanam ki jai. Madhavan ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hare Hare Bol. Any question?
Sharada had a question in the chat. She
Who?
was Sharada.
Sharda, okay.
She said, where is the prayer of Jiva Goswami found, the one that you cited?
About the men and the women attraction? That's
might be that one.
Yeah. It may be that one. It may be found in Bhakti Rasamrita. I think Prabhupada cites in Nectar of Devotion, which is his summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But I can't remember where in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu would it be found. But Jiva Goswami also cites it in Bhakti Sandarbha under the heading of Vandanam, which is the subject today, under prayers. So if you get Bhakti Sandarbha edition, there are Kindle editions of that, and you look up Vandana, then you'll find the verse there. All right? Good one to learn.
Okay. Yes, I have to send a yeah.
Anything else?
There's another question in the chat. It's from Wendy. I don't know what their initiated name is, if they have one. They say, sorry, I lost audio for the moment. What is the location of the verse that allows us to identify where we are on the path of bhakti?
Oh, I think I just answered that. I said that this is a good verse to help us identify where we are in the path of bhakti, but this is only in a broad sense. The verse is talking about, is praying for, when will I be, may my mind naturally be attracted to you, Krishna, just like a young man's mind is attracted to a young girl, or a young girl's mind is attracted to a young boy. So in a broad sense, I was saying, well, from this verse alone, we can understand where we're at. How naturally and spontaneously we're attracted to a young boy or a young girl. That our goal is to be attracted to Krishna like this. So we can see, well, I'm just saying in a broad sense, we can see where we are in the path of bhakti by how attracted we are naturally to Krishna. And what does that mean? Well, compare it to how naturally you're attracted to young boys are attracted to young girls and vice versa. It's not a verse that specifically tells us you're at this stage, you're at that stage. There are many verses for that. There's a book for that called Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. That goes into details of how you can understand what stage you're at. The verse I'm citing is a verse that Jiva Goswami cites in Bhakti Sandarbha under the category of Vandanam, which is what we're talking about today, prayers, this anga, praying, the anga of limb of bhakti, offering prayers. He cites it there as an example of a prayer appropriate for sadhana bhakti, longing to be attracted, if you want to call it a longing, to Krishna, petitioning Krishna, help me to become attracted to you. My pitiable condition is I'm attracted like this to, for example, to the opposite sex, in most cases, without thinking about it. I want to be attracted like that to Krishna. I hope that answer clarifies what I was saying. Here's something from Subal to everyone. He says something in Spanish. Dandavat. Por un lado se escucha de que fue que centra el mantra Hare Krishna con el sentimiento como el de un hijo. He says gracias, but then he says what? Puedas por favor describir algunas palabras al respecto. It means something like, can we please?
Do you want me to translate, Maharaj? Oh, okay, and there is some somewhere.
Well, Krishna is non-different from his name. So in that sense, he's present, right? And this is your point. So how is he absent and how are we longing for him in his absence? Well, the name of Krishna is non-different from the form of Krishna. At the same time, it's said that there's a difference between the name of Krishna and the form of Krishna, in that the name of Krishna is more generous than the form of Krishna. So Krishna, in the form of his name, is more generous because the name comes to us despite the fact that we're ignoring the form of Krishna, or we may have even offended the form of Krishna. As in the case of Brahma, he offended the form of Krishna, but he took birth as Haridas Thakur, and the name stayed with him. So because the name, we chant the name of Krishna with a desire to experience all that's within the name. So in the name is the form of Krishna, are the qualities of Krishna, are the leelas of Krishna. But we have to unpack that. Let us say, let me give another example. Let's say we have milk. We have milk. We might have milk, but we could still long for ghee, right? Now, ghee is inside of milk. It's not anywhere else. Butter is inside of milk, right? Yogurt is inside of milk. But you have to do something with the milk in order to get the butter, in order to get the ghee. So everything is present in the name, but the name comes to us in such a way that by invoking the name, we can experience in a full sense presence of Krishna. We can experience his form, his qualities, his leelas, his associates, and enter into that leela. So when we chant the name effectively and enter into the leela, then the form of Krishna and Krishna's leelas and associates and our service there comes to the forefront, and the name recedes to the background. Whereas before we do that, the name is in the foreground, and the leelas, qualities, service in the leela, and so forth is in the background. So by chanting, that's reversed. I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. So here's another question from the doctor, our doctor here, Vamsi Dhari. So I guess those of us attracted to the same sex need a different prayer. No, I thought that thought came to my mind as I was explaining that. I think I said our attraction to the opposite sex, or as may be the case. So there are those of a homosexual orientation, and the same remains, obviously. The implication is that just as we are have a natural biological sexual attraction, similarly, in this world, we pray to have a similar spontaneous and comprehensive, life-defining, if you will, as our sexuality does, materially speaking, attraction for Krishna. And I think if you understand this point, it's quite significant. In other words, out of this, an identity will arise. Out of our sexual orientation, largely speaking, a whole identity arises, right? I mean, it's most central to our whole existence, practically. So, and so similarly, from bhakti, as it intensifies, as our bhakti intensifies, it'll produce an entire identity, a whole new identity suitable for participating in the Leela. So I hope that addresses your sensibilities, Vamsidhari.
Do you see where Sri Radha has a question from the Brighton Sangha?
I don't yet, no.
Okay, I think that she'll just ask it.
Oh, if I scroll up, maybe I'll see it.
Yeah, because she said it twice.
No.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Sri Radha would like to ask a question. That's all. That's her question. Okay. Permission granted.
Hare Krishna Tripurari Swami. I wanted to ask you this question, that you say you feel, that the separation from Krishna, we have this longing. Now, when devotees who are teaching us about Krishna, like on Sunday with Madame Mahini, Fridays and Tuesday evening when we have Bhagavad Gita, when they go away, I feel a real separation. Now, it's because the separation of not talking about Krishna, because I live on my own and I don't have many people to share it with. My family is not into Krishna. And so is that a separation, a longing for Krishna too, in a subtle way?
Yeah, sure. That's good. It's good. It's good. I'll tell you, I've told this before, but it comes to mind now, and forgive me for repeating for those who've heard it more than once, but when I was a young devotee, and Prabhupada came to Los Angeles and initiated me, he stayed there for 3 months. In subsequent years, he would come twice a year for 3 months at a time, more or less, in the spring and in the winter, 2-3 months. So anyway, my first experience living with Prabhupada in Los Angeles for 3 months was quite overwhelming. And one day I was told that maybe it was Monday, and I was told Wednesday that Prabhupada's going to leave, and I just could not, that just didn't fit in my head and my heart. I just couldn't digest that. I just couldn't imagine a morning without Prabhupada, or just the fact that he was there in his quarters. And so he would go on a walk every morning, and I would go to the door where Prabhupada would come out of the door, the back door, down the steps, and then I would jump and open the car door if I had the opportunity. And in those days, I wasn't going on a walk with Prabhupada. And then I would be waiting just before Prabhupada would come back, and have at the door when Prabhupada came back. And then I'd have to run around to the temple room to be there right there when he came out of the door into the temple, to pay respect to the deity, and then come and sit down and find myself a place, next to his is Vyasa-san. I always had a place right. I managed to secure next to his Vyasa-san. So I was very attached to him, and then hearing his lecture every day and hearing something, maybe an anecdote in a day about him and so forth. So when I was told that he was going to leave, I just couldn't relate to it, and I felt overwhelming feelings that for me anyway were quite blissful and quite ecstatic, and so my mind on my mind immediately appeared this. Oh, this is what they're talking about in the books: separation. I'm experiencing that. Now, you might not feel ecstatic when you go home and there's no classes, but it's a good sign nonetheless if you feel separation from devotees. When Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy, what is the most painful thing in the world? And what did he answer? He said, separation from devotees.
Thank
So,
you. My humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
You've had given us a wonderful talk. Haribol.
All right. Well, anything else here? I don't think
Guru
so.
Maharaj, would you like to have darshan of Dauji Gopal?
Yes, that would be good for me. Hold up, we got. Can anyone? I can relate to you, Sri Radha. I also feel something says. Okay, Krishna Kanaya. I can relate to that feeling. I've been separated from devotees for 2.5 months now, Gayatri says. Okay. Very nice. Vamsi's also approved my answer. All right. Well, let's have the darshan of Dauji Gopal. Dauji Gopal, Ki Jai, Sri Madhavan, Ki Jai. Okay, Kishore. We lost you. Oh, now he froze. Now we're feeling separation from Dauji Gopal more than ever. Alas. On my scene, I'm seeing everyone in Brighton there. Nice to see all of you. There's Manan Mohan, Mohini. Haribo. And there's, well, okay, no. So let's see who I see. Saragrahi, picture of one of her pictures. Sajan, I see him. Vivian Villa, I see. I don't think I've met you. Krishna Kanaya. Harijan Das. Bhajan Das. There's Sham Sundar. There's Sakirati and Shamananda. Govinda Mohini. Haribol, Govinda Mohini Ki Jai. Mahara, nice to see you. Hope everything's well there. Chaitanya Charan, nice to see you. Chaitanya Charan in Chile. Carolina, hello. So still, I'm waiting for the darshan of Dauji Gopal, but it looks like Madhavan, maybe the internet froze there or something. Archan City, Chitahari, Shamdas, Krishna Govinda, Diego Romero, hello. Nuria, so many nice devotees. Ganga Shakti, Wendy, Ayodhya Dham Dasi. That's an interesting name. Ram Bhakti Ki Jai. Mahamantra,